Iranian Family, A Glimpse Through Sima's Eyes. This presentation was made by Julia Breidenback, Christopher Pang, Maisie Lee, and Crystal Tang. This presentation was created for Family and Social Sciences 3102, Family Systems and Diversity. The official religion in Iran is Shia Islam. The population of Iran in 1966 was 25.7 billion. The population in 1976 skyrocketed to 33.7 billion. Until 1979, Pahlavi dynasty was in power. Sima, the woman that we are interviewing, lived in this bustling capital, Tehran, pictured here on the slide. Family roles were strongly influenced by Islamic values. According to Islamic family law, fathers and husbands were to wield considerable power. Fathers and husbands operated as the head of household. The primary role of women was to be a child rearer and homemaker. The legal age of marriage for men was 18 years old. For women, it was 16 years old. To the right, we see the average births per woman in 4 provinces in Iran. In 1963, the Shah introduced modern social, economical, and political reforms that were later called the White Revolution. This revolution included women's suffrage and right to stand for public office. The Family Protection Law that was enacted in 1976 increased women's rights to divorce and gain custody of children. After 1979, after the revolution, the Family Protection Law was annulled, and the legal marriage age for women dropped to 14 years old. Though education is gender-specific now, leaders urge families to send their daughters to school. To the bottom, we see the percentage of women in the workforce from 1956 to 1976 through demography. On the bottom right, we see the percentage of illiterate women around the age of 20 by province through 1960 to 1980. The Iranian Revolution happened just after Sima's family left. The factors of the revolution included religious conservatives opposing the Shah's rapid shift in policy and development, particularly regarding women's rights. Another factor was modernization of labor, leading to loss of jobs and greater income inequality. College graduates at the time were without job prospects. There was also a general fear of American culture dominating and replacing Iranian culture. In response to this opposition, the Shah abolished other opposing parties. He enacted a secret police called Savak to censor, arrest, and torture his opposition. The army was violent against protesters, and in response to this mistreatment of protesters, more demonstrations grew. Eventually, due to the opposition, the monarchy collapsed. Do you mind introducing yourself?
I'm Sima Sharia.
Do you want to just briefly describe your family if you want?
Okay, so I am one of 3 children.
Okay.
I have an older brother and a younger sister.
Mm-hmm.
We moved, the 5 of us moved here in 1978, and we came on 6th of July. And I was 13 when we moved, and I lived in Tehran, which is the capital of Iran.
You were talking about how, your father and mother both practiced Shia Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that affected your family dynamics growing up?
So yeah, both my parents, in general in Iran, majority of the populations are Muslims. Both my parents come from traditional Muslim families. My dad's family is very conservative Muslims, and they also, all the women in his family wore what we call chador, and they wore the black chador, which meant they were even more strict. I mean, some people, the chador is like a long piece of cloth that you put on yourself. It's like think about like a rectangular sheet of cloth, and just right on yourself, and then holding it right in front of you.
Yeah.
But my dad's family wore the black chador, which also is, even the color black has something to do with more conservatism. And so that was his family. He married my mom, who comes from a family who was very different in that my grandmother did not wear a headscarf, and nobody in my mom's side of the family had any head covering, and they had followed and gone to school and beyond high school. And one of my aunts had started a very small pastry shop, and ended up, by the time we left, she had the most the best pastry shop in Tehran, and she ran the whole business. And I had another aunt who was a teacher, and my mom did not work outside of the house. So it was the dynamic of the women were they were kind of all over the board, and so again, so within my dad's family, they practiced praying 5 times a day for the month of Ramadan. For the whole month they fasted. In my mom's side of family, some of them prayed, some of them didn't pray, some of them fasted, some of them didn't fast, but there is this understanding. Like during the month of Ramadan, people who didn't really fast respected others. I mean, there was really no, there was no issue between um, people. I mean, some people practiced, some people didn't, and the whole city didn't shut down during the month of Ramadan. And people, businesses still worked, and people still went to work, and all of that. So
it was kind of like what works best for you is good.
And people, I mean, as far as prayer, if you went to work, you didn't, I mean, there wasn't necessarily, people did not take off from work to pray. Some people did go to like local mosques if they were around. Some people would pray at home and then go to work. It was never, like, never made it like a big issue. Um,
Inside your family, did you feel like there was like any expectation of like following Ramadan or wearing the
No, not at all. And so it was interesting. My dad came to Minnesota in the 50s on a scholarship. So he was granted a scholarship, but at the time the Shah was in rule, and every year he gave a couple of scholarships through University of Tehran. That year there were 7 students. My dad was one of them. 2 of them came here to Minnesota because there was a Honeywell connection. 3 of them went to New York, and 2 of them went to California. And all of it had to do with business connections, probably. I don't know what the California and New York connections were, but so he was a mechanical engineer, so he came here, studied here, and worked here, and went back to Iran. He and my mom got married. They came back. I was born here, my brother was born here, and then with my mom's 3rd pregnancy, she said, "I'm done, I'm going back." So she moved back. My dad came back maybe, I don't know, 6-7 months after that. So she had my younger sister in Iran. And then, I think I was a year old when she went back. And then 12 years later, we came back here. So the fact that my dad lived here for 8 or 9 years tremendously affected him. And again, this is still a man who comes from a very conservative family. Yet he was a very aspiring engineer. He's I call him a German Iranian because Iranians are, in general, majority of them they're never on time. They're not organized. And my dad is like, he's the one you can count on, So he's not a typical Iranian, and in that sense, and here, I mean, so when we went back, as we were growing, my dad taught my sister and I, along with my brother, how to bike, how to swim, how to ski. I mean, whatever he was, he really, and he was an outdoor person himself. So, and it wasn't really typical for too many girls to be taught a lot of these just physical activities. But I remember he used to drive us to our school. We went to public schools, and it was much farther in town. A lot of people sent their kids, I mean, people would take the bus to town. My husband also grew up in Iran, and he used to take the public transportation. It was very typical, kind of like New York. But my dad used to drive us, a super protective person he is. But in our drives, he taught us how to pray. I mean, he would recite the prayers, and that's how we learned. And so it was in our drives that I learned, he would pass on some of the things that was important to him, but he never told us you have to pray 5 times a day. And I remember a couple of times fasting because I knew my dad was fasting and my aunts were fasting. So the whole, in many ways, many people were fasting. So I was like, oh, okay, I want to do this too. And so it was more curiosity than having to do it.
Yeah, I feel like just to like connect to family.
Totally, and then the whole after breaking the fast is a huge thing for people who do it. So it's and we wanted that big dinner.
Yeah.
So we wanted to earn it. So that was a part of doing it, and so yeah.
Definitely. So I hear you talking about, your father and just kind of instilling this kind of feeling of like education is important.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that that's, something that your family did for you, is just instill this desire for education and learning?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's and education is really important. In Iran, I think now I think the percentage of women who have gone to school is like somewhere around 70 or 80%. I mean, it's really important. And during Shah's regime, he was trying to get schools everywhere, but not fast enough, not really fair enough, and not quick enough. There's certainly a culture that really believes in education, and that is how, and status is through education in that part of the world. I don't know, every other culture, but I know for sure in Iran, a doctor or an engineer can say whatever they want, and it's, it's up there.
Yeah, definitely.
But even if they don't know what they're talking about, so that part of education is really important.
Yeah, when I was doing research about Iran, kind of like there were statistics on like how many people finished like elementary school and were like literate and everything, and like the numbers were actually, pretty small. But they were mostly like rural areas. Like for you in Tehran, did you see kind of like did most kids go to school or?
Definitely.
Okay.
Well, it's got to be, depends where your source is too, Julia. I think even rural, so after the revolution, when it happened, it was really about taking the haves down and the have-nots up. I mean, it was a revolution of people who had felt they were on the periphery, and many factors, but that was one of the big factors. So one thing that this administration has done is there's colleges everywhere in Iran now. So people have access to education. Now, standards might be lower, but the distributing education democratically is definitely way out there, more than most other countries. I remember looking at it in way back when, and I was really surprised at how many colleges and universities are out there.
Yeah.
But again, standards might not be, it might be different.
I did see that, it was really cool that, after the revolution, they tried to get parents to like let their daughters go to school, but I also saw that usually the curriculum was gendered. When you were going to school there, did you feel like you were taught differently because of your gender? Or?
So that's a good question. Yeah. So I went to an all-girls school when I started. Fourth or fifth grade, I can't remember. Before it was boy and girls mixed school, but level of education was the same in both. So as far as I know, I know the girls were just as aggressive about their education as the guys were. So, and today, and with regards to girls, all girls went to school as far as I know. And the girls who came from very conservative religious schools went to more conservative schools, where a lot of them wore scarf. And once you were in all-girls school, majority of your teachers were female. We had a couple of male teachers, and a couple of friends that I had who did wear a scarf would put their scarf on when we had our male teachers. but the rest of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool that you're able to like experience that. Did your brother get like kind of a different education then, or?
So he went to an all-boys school,
Okay.
and I think it was similar. I mean, I honestly, I don't know the curriculums now. Now that, I mean, I never thought about it.
Yeah.
So I finished 8th grade when I came here from Iran, so.
Okay, yeah. Inside your family, did you feel like you had kind of different roles because of your gender? Like, what were kind of like the things expected of you? You know, responsibilities wise, that kind of thing?
You know, not a lot. I mean, no. I mean, gender matters no matter what, you know. So, and that's you know, everywhere we have patriarchal cultures, and same thing in Iran, and gender mattered. I mean, there are little bits and pieces that show superiority over inferiority. I mean, even sitting up front would be given to men and women in the back. Not in all families, but majority of places. And something I noticed actually after we moved here. So in Iran, we never went to a mosque to pray or be a part of anything. But after we moved here, I think my dad was in such a shock about how much things had changed.
Yeah.
And we were teenagers, and after a couple of months of us being in school, he was like, you know, I think something hit him, and he realized we have to be a part of some sort of community. And the only thing he thought, there really weren't that many Iranians here. We didn't know anybody, so he found a mosque. So we started going to a mosque, and it was the first time that I noticed the men sat in front and the women had to be in the back.
Yeah.
To this day, it's like that. So.
How was that for you?
I was so angry. It was really shocking. I mean, a lot of it was shock, you know. It was. I really didn't have much to say at that time. I was like, oh, okay, why? You know, it was a lot of observation at that time because, and you know, we entered a mosque. There were people from Palestine, Egypt, Africa, Moroccans, Algerians, Iraqis, Syrians, Malaysia. So here, like here, I'm coming from Iran. We hardly speaking English, and we're hardly even figuring things out in our high school. And then my parents are taking us to a community that here, like 10 other cultures I have to figure out. So it was really quite a confusing experience. Yeah.
That'd be really interesting.
Only later, like maybe 10 years ago, like all of this, like when I really started, no, more than that, it was really with regards to raising my own children, that identity, and I started really thinking about it and really deciding what is it that I want to pass on, what is it that I don't want to pass on. I mean, it became like the subject of my life. So what am I teaching my kids? So it was then that I realized, oh my God, that was crazy. I was trying to figure out how to speak and read, and here we were all of a sudden, you know, our community were people that I didn't even know. I mean, I didn't even know their backgrounds, and every country has its own culture and history and traditions and mannerisms, and so yeah.
So being like thrown into this like hodgepodge of cultures, how did that like affect your parenting, do you think?
Well, okay, so in fact, it made it very clear to me that I had to be very clear with my kids. So I had to decide which route I'm going to take. So now we're jumping way forward, but I think I'm going to slow us down. So up until my son was born, our older son was born, and I was dead set to go back to Iran. I had not found my way here, and I could not really resonate with people, and I did go back with him. He turned 2 over there, so that was 23 years ago. We went back, and it was my research trip to figure out how my husband and I are gonna go back. And I went back, and almost immediately I realized, oh my God, I don't belong here. You know, it was, and many things. We stayed there for 5 weeks, so I saw a lot of family, friends, and I realized, wow, I don't belong here. This is not my home anymore. So when I came back, then it became very clear to me, this is my home. So that was the beginning for me to recognize, up until then, I kept saying, we're going back home, we're going back home.
Yeah.
And home was really going back to Iran. And then I realized, that is not my home. So it was a big change. I think I cried all the time. I mean, I literally would cry. I mean, that, and later on, I see an astrologer now, so now I know Pisces.
That fits.
Yeah, so I've seen her 3 times in the last 4 years, and it's interesting to know who we are and how we process things. And yeah, I mean, letting go was not easy for me, and I spoke Farsi to both of our boys, and my younger son was about 3 years old, and I would, like any book, like Dr. Seuss, I would read everything in Farsi. I mean, I would look and translate. I mean, I was like a quick translator. Of course, it didn't rhyme. And some of the books I would put aside because I'm like, okay, we got to do that later because it just doesn't make sense. But I remember my 3-year-old saying, Mom, you need to speak in my language with me. And I mean, he literally said that to me, and I'm like, oh, I didn't think much about it. And he said it to me again, and I realized, oh my God, this is in Farsi, he's telling me, because I'm reading this book in Farsi. And that was the beginning of me to recognize that, okay, here, this is a language. What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? And then I also realized, well, I'll go back again. So when I started high school here in 9th grade, there was no ESL or ELL that they have now. And we were the first group. I think there was 2 students from, 2 Hmong students. My sister, myself, and my brother, and a couple other students. None of us spoke English. So they started the first ESL that year, and literally we would sit in the room and do nothing. And that was my 9th grade. 10th grade, I mean, the more time passed, the more afraid I was being in class because I did not speak. Nobody taught me how to understand syntax, grammar. I mean, they tried, but at a level that was so high that I wasn't absorbing. So I'm really good at learning things fast without even understanding it. So I picked up English really fast, and people thought, oh my God, you're so good, But really, I did not understand it. You can learn how to speak and really not understand what you're saying, or really at a deeper level. So that one side, and the other side was that I was so afraid to speak because I could speak, but if I were like in my government class, I was supposed to do a paper. I didn't know how to do a paper, right? So I was so afraid to talk that I actually stopped talking. And also, kids, it's a very uncomfortable age to move into a group of teenagers. And this is suburbia, Midwest. People don't know how to connect. Kids don't know how to connect, and I come from a culture that when somebody new comes, you are received. I mean, people receive you, so, and you are helped, and you're shown around. And here I show up, and there's nobody that helps me in anything, and the disconnection was so profound for me that I just resented, like if this is American culture, I don't want this, right? And so that's why it led up to all those years of wanting to go back home, because I learned to disconnect. And by the time it was a good 4 or 5 years of me really not speaking, and I spoke at home, but nobody knew when I was in school. I mean, some people, there are a couple of fabulous people that I still I'm connected with a couple of people who tried, but when I think I made up my mind that I don't want to know these people. It was enough. I felt disconnected enough that I thought, okay, I'm not interested in you anymore. And it's interesting because I love people. I'm a people person. You know,
Yeah.
it's like knowing people's stories is more important to me than anything else. So it meant that a part of me was just, I mean, I pushed a part of me that was really important that needed to develop really way down. So coming to college, I lost why I went back. In college is when I realized I can't comprehend, and I didn't know who to get help from, and I didn't know what was wrong. All I knew is I was gonna study. I'm gonna read this history thing, and I spent probably day and night in the library. And calculus, math, I was good at. Physics, I was good at. French, I was good at. Art, I was good at. I was going to school of architecture, so I had to go with this curriculum. But history, English, I mean, I was failing in those. So I was like, what is wrong with this? And took me forever to figure it out. But I was accepted to School of Architecture, and so I really didn't have to. I struggled, but I kind of let go of like, why am I not getting this? I just went along, and so when I was reading English to my kids, now I come back to that. When I started reading English, I realized, oh my God, I should have started reading books for 4-year-olds way back then, because that's how you learn. And it was interesting. I mean, I learned because I was reading the easiest books for my kids, and I had the time to. I mean, it wasn't like I didn't know. I had a ton of vocabulary, but to have have that information comprehension definition, very different story. And I had the time. I decided to stay at home with my kids, and so started my learning English.
Yeah, and it would have been really hard to kind of go through those years of like, okay, this is where I belong, and then coming there and then not feeling that. Yeah, that would be a tragedy, I feel.
Yeah, it was heavy. It was really heavy. Yeah, but you have to process. It's like one of those things that I've learned in life that in order to open up for something new, you have to let go of what is old and that doesn't resonate with you. But some of us hold on forever.
Yeah.
So learning to let go is a really good practice, and
Yeah. So not feeling very connected with American culture, do you think that helped you kind of connect to your family back in Iran, and maybe even your family in the United States? Like, did you feel closer to them because it was kind of isolating?
That's the only people that I had, absolutely. And no, not with my family in Iran, because in time we all changed, and that's why I think when I went back, I realized, I was so different than my cousins. The whole country, there was a revolution happened, and I mean, something of trauma to a whole country happened, and we weren't there. And so, but here, as far as family system, really deep. I mean, my parents, I mean, a very traditional Iranian family, keeping everybody together, and and staying connected, and
Do you feel like family kind of had a looser definition than it does in the United States?
Say the last part again.
That family had a different kind of looser definition in Iran than the United States.
Looser? How do you mean looser?
So like the boundaries, I feel in America are a lot stricter. Like my family is my father, my mother, my brother, maybe a few friends. Did you feel like that it was kind of like looser and broader?
So immediate family is definitely immediate family, but extended family, very important. I mean, every Friday we went to my grandma's, my mom's side of family, then my dad's side of family. That was Fridays or Sundays in Iran, so that's the day when families get together. And I mean, that was our day. We spent the whole day with my cousins and aunts. First in my mom's family, then my dad was always about equal. So we stayed more at my mom's because she had more cousins, and So I would say because of proximity. So here, I mean, this is where cities and city plannings and structures come into play. I mean, living in a suburb where everybody is, I mean, very few people have their close relatives together. People don't have that connection. I mean, there's some, I can't say, but and proximity, I mean, distances are so much longer here. Whereas in Iran, everything is more condensed, and again, people really make time to spend the time with family, and I mean, that's what it was 40 years ago.
So, where would you say your class or your family was in kind of like the class system in Iran?
In Iran. So when my family, when my parents came back from U.S., I mean, we lived in an apartment, in a very middle class neighborhood where pretty much everybody lived in apartments, or maybe small single family homes. But my dad started a company with 3 other people, and they mechanical engineer, structural engineer, and architecture, and they did. I mean, their business boomed quite a bit, and they are really successful, and they connected to architects here in Twin Cities that my dad knew, and so our way of life changed quite a bit. He built a house farther up in an upper part of Tehran, which used to be some of the oldest part of Tehran, with a lot of beautiful green spaces, which do not exist anymore because everything has been built. But so we were definitely upper middle class before we left Tehran. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that your perception of your own class altered your behavior towards Iranian society? Or even society here?
I'm like I said, I've always been fascinated with people and change, the differences between people, and very acutely aware of class, and very uncomfortable with the class that I ended up with in Iran. I was extraordinarily uncomfortable with being in the upper class, mostly because I mean, I would see people literally, in a tent, a couple of blocks down, if it was just a land that hadn't been built on. So that knowing how much we had and how little they had, I've always been aware of it. I have never. I learned quickly how to use my class to help people as opposed to feel guilty about it. And I think that had to do especially with like watching my parents, my mom like literally making extra food for the workers who lived in a tent next door, and just giving a pot, taking it to them, and just like really simple things of just sharing and recognizing that, you don't have to, you might not be able to fix everything, but you can be a part of a bigger picture, and just with small help here and there. So yeah, very aware of class. And when I moved here and we lived in Edina, which is suburbs here are very separate. And I mean, I studied architecture and city planning, so now I know why things are the way. I mean, very segregated, very class separated. There's some diversity, but I don't call having one black person and a couple of Asians or Middle Easterns, and I don't call that diversity. To me, diversity is an economic diversity. When you have economic diversity, then you have all colors and shapes, and then you really have different thoughts. And so Midwest separation was really, I realized how suffocating that was to me. I could not stand living in a place where everybody looked the same way and did the same things and thought the same things, and I've always been fully aware of that.
Especially growing up in a place where differences were so accepted.
Well, there's class there.
Yeah, yeah.
So economic help, yeah, but
Mhm.
there is class in Iran. I mean,
Yeah.
we have racism here, but classism is deep in that culture, and that, you know, that there's that unbreakable glass for a lot of people there as
Yeah.
well. You know, so there is that, but I think the economic diversity is what was really important for me, and just the humanity of it
Yeah.
in recognizing just because somebody doesn't make that kind of money, they are no less or more than the other.
Mhm.
Whereas here, it really is very clear. That, you know,
Yeah.
so I don't know. At least that's how I observed it.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Right.
seeing some problems in Iran and then coming here and then seeing a
A
whole
whole different, yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
how you see. I mean, the system, like a system of a culture, and yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That's really amazing that you were able to, like, even at a young age, you know, see that and be uncomfortable with it and challenge it.
You know, I think watching the simple sharing amongst people, and that happens in a lot of places. I mean, I went to Ecuador with my son 3 years ago, and in a very small town, nobody spoke English. And it's similar, you know, when people are when there's small proximity, there is it's a different dynamic. You know, you watch people being more comfortable being around each other, accepting and not just recognizing each other's humanity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. um, so you and your family kind of adapted economically by your father going to school in the U.S. and kind of, you know, getting a job in Iran.
So I would say, in fact, in Iran, he was very well established. But coming back here, coming to Minnesota, he learned, and working at a very um, a progressive architecture office, he learned how to run a business. And so when he went back, he and his partners, three partners, I mean, they set up. They all. Two of them were all educated in Iran. One had gone to Italy, and my dad here. And so they were all people. I mean, Iran was booming at that time. It was like if you were in Iran in early 70s, anything, and you had any type of education and were going to establish a business, that business was going to flourish. And they happened to be at the right place, right time, and, you know, hardworking and knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, together they were able to, yeah.
Nice. So earlier you said that you felt close to your family because you kind of felt isolated, you know, in America. What was communication like within your family?
I mean, really, well, my family, communication, that's really good. Yeah, well, nobody really talked about anything really when I think about that. Even today, I mean, the way I have evolved is different than the way my sister, my brother, and my parents have changed in the last 40 years. And really, we all have done it differently, and we still think our perspectives are different still. And when I decided to switch to English for my boys, I had some major battles with my dad, where he wanted us to speak Farsi all the time with them and in front of them with the kids and all of that. And when my boys were older, I told my dad, I mean, I thought in a very cordial way that, you know, I think it would be really good if you switch to English when the discussions get more difficult, because I wanted my boys to have that, really, their relationship with their grandfather to keep maturing. And he was so offended, and just, I mean, I was as if I had asked for like the worst thing in the world. I had offended him. But over time, I mean, he's understood what is it that I've done. My sister did not switch the way I did. My brother, who has had his kids much older, he married an Iranian woman who is very very open-minded, very Western educated and all of that, but speaks Farsi, and she has told her children they're Iranian. They're 11 years old. They've never been, well, they've traveled to Iran, but they're here and they're told they're Iranian. Their country is Iran. So everybody is different. You know? I was very clear with my boys. This is your home. This is your country. English is your main language. I spoke Farsi with you because this is, I wanted my husband's parents who don't speak English at all. It was really important for me for the boys to have really good relationship with both grandparents, and so they have, and it's been wonderful. And so I did things very differently, and I quit a lot of my friendships with the Iranian community that I was a part of because of the way I was changing and how they did not change. So it was really, it's a very strange, delicate balance.
Yeah.
And my kids were in school. I had to figure out school system, and I didn't grow up here. So I felt like there's so much learning I need to do with their school, and then getting to know their friends, who their parents were. I mean, I decided that was more important to me than staying connected with Iranians.
Yeah.
Which meant my husband was furious at me, no socializing with old friends, and it was really hard for him.
Yeah.
And we battled it out, and I said, I'm sorry, I don't have that much energy. And so, I mean, this is like many years later, he totally understands. And we both are grateful that we've made all the changes, but it was I knew I had to do it, I just didn't realize how exhausting it was and how unsupported we were. But I did not want my kids to go through the identity things. I mean, everybody will go through some sort of identity figuring out, evolving. That's how we learn, that's how we grow. But I did not want them to go through their identity as like where they belong. I wanted them to know this is their home and they don't have to think they are going back. I mean, I did not want to be the next Cuban generation of, always wanting to go back to Cuba. Because I always thought that was so interesting that a whole generation in that culture too still talks about going back home. And I did not want to be like that. After I went to Iran and I realized, oh my God, how stupid is that? Home is wherever you are. And that's what became really clear to me.
Yeah, you wanted them to feel content where they were.
Yeah, I mean, there will always be you question yourself and your identity and who we are. What are we doing here? I mean, with all the world events,
Yeah.
But I did not want them to question, like, not feeling belong. I never wanted them to disconnect the way I did. What I did was horrible for myself. But it was my way of surviving and not knowing any other way.
Definitely.
But
you did the best that you could.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. It taught me a lot. But I always wanted them to be able to connect with everybody around them and not feel like an outsider.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people, including my niece and nephew to some extent, that have felt they felt like an outsider because their parents practice a very different parenting. So
a lot of hard choices being an immigrant parent.
Yeah, and I think it all starts with your own parents. Now I can see how shocked my parents were, and they were kind of like, they didn't talk about anything, and had they talked about, as a family, oh my gosh, now we have to do this, or, look at how things are here. If there was a talk, then we would have some sort of dialogue of what is going on. But there was no dialogue, it was all silent existence about what we're doing.
So there was no normalizing like the pain you were experiencing.
Yeah, I think in many ways it's because they were going through their own trauma, and and when you don't verbalize it, it becomes an inside trauma. When you talk about things, you start letting go. But when you don't, it becomes what we call trauma, and it stays. And again, you disconnect. You think you're an outsider. I mean, I'm always an outsider. I can't help it, right? I mean, it's just the way I am. I always look from a different perspective because I have a different perspective. But I also feel like this is my home, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely like kind of learning different ways of communicating, you know, than your own family did with like, you know, your kids. And
Oh
your
my
partner.
gosh, yeah. I mean, we
Yeah.
discussed, yeah. I mean, I mean, many issues come up, you know, and you know, we didn't celebrate Christmas, um, and that was when we didn't grow up celebrating Christmas, and all my kids' friends celebrated Christmas.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I mean, one of my sons took like his sock and his literal his sock, he taped it above our fireplace. Mom put something in it for Christmas.
Gonna celebrate this.
Yeah, and you know, and as a parent, if you're paying attention, you were thinking, I was thinking, you know, this is important to him. I have to do something. I don't have to, because I felt like I can't celebrate Christmas because that would be superficial. There's a lot of meaning behind Christmas. So if I'm going to do it, it has to have meaning.
Yeah.
I am not about gift giving. To me, that is minimizing the culture. So I thought, okay, I can do some part of it. You know, I can give them something, and so they know that. But I also wanted to explain Christmas and what it really meant, what it means, and so I mean, those were the dialogues that started,
Yeah, I can definitely kind of see, not to put words in your mouth, but like, you know, education, like your family seeing education as a value, and like you seeing like, okay, we're not going to just do Christmas, we're going to like talk about this, and you know, see the educational value behind it.
Yeah, well, but it's interesting. All the Iranians that I know that did not switch to English and that did not really get involved in the community, they all celebrated Christmas all of a sudden. Which is fascinating to me because I thought, you know, that's easy to do. Anybody can put up a tree and put gifts and say, you know, Merry Christmas. But it took me a while to recognize that I was maybe the last one. Like my sister used to do that, and my kids would, why does Auntie Mitra do that, and why is it that way? And I really kind of like, I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to me. Yeah, and again, like I said, I mean, I really got involved in the community. I really, with families, and none of my friends did. And it was interesting about what it means. I mean, what part of it, how do we become a part of the culture? Is it superficial, or, I mean, to me, making connections with people is what mattered.
Yeah.
And that was the meaning for me, but my kids, you know, like any kid, people want to be a part of the big picture.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned. I realized, okay, you know, I don't have to separate them. I can do, and I was working I had part-time jobs, and one of them was at a greenhouse, and I literally fell in love with Christmas trees. So that's when I actually bought a Christmas tree, and yada yada yada.
So you didn't do Christmas as much. Were there other celebrations that you did do?
Yeah, Thanksgiving. I mean, Thanksgiving. My aunt is from Peru. They also live here, and she used to do Thanksgiving, and so that was a big part of the family. And I mean, now it's Thanksgiving, and this has been in my house probably in our house for almost 15 years, and everybody in my family comes there, and it's huge, and it's a really, in many ways, our favorite time to be together. And yeah, so I mean, a lot of traditions. I mean, even Christmas, I have family over and sometimes friends, and so to me, it's really about acknowledging being together.
Yeah. Were there any traditions like you brought from your Muslim faith and from Iran?
Yeah, so Iran celebrates the beginning of spring, is the New Year, and everybody in Iran celebrates it. It's kind of like New Year here, where everybody celebrates. It's a very old celebration that goes to Zoroastrian time, and So the country basically would shut down because, and it's a beautiful celebration. It's a celebration of rebirth and growth, and we set out a table that is gorgeous and really beautiful. And in fact, I organized a program at Children's Museum for 7 years when my kids were young. I approached Children's Museum because they used to do all kinds of celebrations for children, and I used to take our boys there. So I organized it with a group of my friends eventually, and really inviting people to come in and showing them what Nowruz is about. Nowruz means new day, and it's celebrated in that whole region, Afghanistan and parts of Pakistan, India.
Yeah. That's awesome that you're able to like kind of bring some of that joy, you know, to the...
Yeah, and it's really hard because it falls right in when we get snow, and
yeah.
here we're celebrating 2 feet of snow outside,
Yeah.
and it's the beginning of
Don't
spring.
feel like
So
celebrating.
yeah.
Not much, yeah. Any other major celebrations that...
No, I mean there are other major celebrations, but really, I mean there's winters, all the solstices and equinoxes are really important. And winter solstice, when my kids were little, I used to do some things too. And that's also acknowledged in Iran. It's huge, and people gather. It's the longest night of the year, and yada yada yada. You know, so there's a lot of sitting together and eating. But eventually, I didn't really. It's too much.
Yeah.
It really was about there's too much when there's no community to back you up, and if you're not if there's a big community, it's possible. But I felt like for everything, I have to do everything, and even the program at the museum, I had to organize it, and people. I learned that Iranian community is really good about showing up, but really not about doing the work. They're very good at coming and critiquing the work, but doing the work. So really, again, talking about volunteerism and that is different. And they also, there's a group of people that they did their own thing, but like I said, there's a different kind of class system, and I was considered as a nobody because I was only 13 then when I came here from Iran, and so they considered me like my Farsi not to be good enough, like nothing about my work was good enough. So eventually I decided to do the program at the Children's Museum with a whole different group of people. And, it's interesting. I learned a lot about who I resonate with and who I don't resonate with.
Yeah, definitely. That is really interesting, kind of like feeling like your English was under attack at kind of the same time that your Farsi.
My Farsi, when that happened, literally, Julia, I used to help, it was a Farsi school, and I took my kids there for a little while, and literally one of the teachers said, well, you can't teach anything. Not even, this is not kindergarten, like I can teach kindergarten. And she went on how much credentials she had, and I was shocked. I was like, I have done all kinds of volunteer work, and pretty much we all can get trained into. And so anyhow, in many ways, I recognized, wow, these are not even this group of people that I thought is forward thinking is not my community. So I have had to move around a lot to find who my community is.
Definitely, that's frustrating.
At the time it was, but it's been the best thing in my life because it's showed me that I have to create my own path and understand in order to do what I love to do. So I am definitely an independent thinker. So,
definitely.
And I resonate with a lot of people, and so
Do you think that independent thinking kind of like came as a response to the collectivism, or do you think it was, kind of part of your family's dynamic, just like?
I think just rejection. I felt rejected by so many groups that and like I said, I thank God I had a lot of respect for myself. So I never thought there was I didn't think there was something wrong with me, but I knew.
Great.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to belong somewhere. But my question was like, where do I belong? I thought it would be like, the Iranian community, no, maybe the Farsi school community, no, with my old friends community, and then I realized we're all so different. So little by little, I realized, well, actually, no, it has to do with who values. In many ways, it became my parenting community with parents that I resonated with, and my kids went to school, and we shared different, similar values. So.
Yeah. So do you think that your family network kind of like grew to like kind of adding those people in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Much later. I mean, I do regret not having done it sooner but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm glad the light bulb went on, and I thought, I need to figure this out for my kids. They need to have a bigger community. So.
Yeah. A lot of figuring out, how to adapt with like what you know. Like 13 is such an early age to figure that out. Even for people like being born in the same country, it's a really difficult time and trying to like understand who you are as yourself.
That's so true. I mean, that's really a really good point, because I've had many friends who have grown up here saying that to me, and I said, no, you had it easier.
Yeah.
and I kept wanting to say, no, it was much more difficult for me.
I think you have a right to.
But Julia, the more time passed, I realized this is personal growth for all of us. Yes, it is more difficult when you're an immigrant, but like many of I've had friends who were in refugee camps for 3 to 15 years, right? So it's really about making to me, I mean, the new word for me that matters so much is perspective making, is that you reframe, you realize, yes, this was difficult, but I have choices. I can make a difference. And for somebody like me, I did have choices. I mean, there are people who don't have choices. So yeah, I think I made it a lot more harder for myself. But that's who I am.
Yeah, definitely. So this is kind of like, in recent politics, this is kind of a big question, so you really don't have to answer it super clearly, but like, how has President Trump's travel ban in 2017, identifying Iran as a threat to national security in the United States, like affected your family, like here and even over there,
So Iranians are so resilient now, because we've been on the news forever.
Yeah.
So I mean, really, literally since 1979, when the hostage taking happened, and that was really when it affected me so profoundly. I mean, for 444 days, the news came on, day 50 of hostage day 420 of hostage day. So Iran has always been in the news that way. That's another part why I did not, I was so mad at media and the portrayal of Iranian. I mean, all of it was so wrong to me. The most beautiful people that I knew, all of a sudden, everybody's looking at me. I mean, I am right away the terrorist, I mean, we talk about it then, but I was 14, and right away, I mean, people were looking at me like, I mean, that was another factor to it, because when the hostage taking happened, I felt responsible. Like, I felt like I had to explain everything to people, and we take those roles on when the media attacks a group of people. And so, having said that, we've been in the news forever, and we have grown to understand that this is what it is. And my husband has been traveling to Iran more than ever, because his mom passed away 2 years ago, and his dad is really at end of life now. And so the only difference is now when he came back from Iran, when he came to US, they just wanted to see his both Iranian and American passport. And it's not an issue because he's been a citizen for a long time, and I'm a citizen. So really, it hasn't affected our family, but I know it has affected many students, many people who want to travel, and families who want to come and visit their children, and
So for you, it kind of felt like we're the last in a long line of discrimination.
Yeah, I mean, if had we not been citizens, yeah, it would have been really hard, but we've been citizens for a long time, and the rhetoric is rhetoric. I mean, as far as I um, understand it and I've known, it's politics. Politics is about pitting people against each other, and American politics is very different inside America than outside America. So in general, immigrants are fully aware of it, especially if America has had something to do with the country you come from.
Yeah.
So we know foreign policies, and most people in America don't know the CIA had its first coup d'etat in Iran. I mean, we know that. The information is out there now. It came out 20 some years ago, or 10 some, I can't remember. But Iranians have always known that, and it was the first democratic movement, the most educated people, more open media in Iran in 50s than has ever been in majority of places. More than it is right now in United States. People more educated because it was free information. But this is the stuff that we know, but has never been here. However, having said that, that was there, but it was the most undemocratic country at the time. We had all this money that should have been used for educating people, and it wasn't. It was a very frivolous, corrupt system, and eventually imploded. So
yeah. So raising kids in kind of a country that's kind of trained to distrust them. How was that, and how did you feel like your responsibility as a mother was in protecting them?
I never mentioned anything. They've never felt they were different. Their friends if I made similar foods to what they ate, I also introduced Persian food to them, Farsi words, and really both my kids very comfortable. But I never made a distinction ever. What I did teach my children really clearly was how to read advertisement, how to notice how women are degraded constantly, how Black people in my own community need that. If there was ever a police car pulled over as I'm driving, I would tell them, look back, I will put my money down. Whoever is driving in that car is a Black person. 3 out of 4 times it was a Black person. So I showed these to them because I wanted them to understand race and how people are viewed. But with regards to them, I mean, as they got older, I know they've had their own experiences, some of it that they've shared with me. I mean, they're 25 and 22 now. Some of it, as they got older, they shared with me, but they always felt a part of everything around them.
Good.
Yeah.
Do you think growing up being so aware of social justice issues in Iran kind of made you susceptible to be sensitive to kind of the social justice issues we have in the U.S.?
It's actually, it's who I am, because I know plenty of Iranians who are not like that. So, no, it is, in fact, social justice has always been important to me, and that's why I think having had that perspective made me understand things so much faster here and see things faster. And I studied city planning and history and architecture, and when you really understand how things are designed and laid out and why lines were drawn, then when you understand that, then things make sense. And so I passed down whatever I could, but I always wanted my kids to feel like they're part of a bigger picture. And if you're going to make a change, you have to be a part of the picture. You can't. My culture is all about fight.
Yeah.
And I learned that, you know what? With fighting, you're not going to get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it had to do with because, there was, when the revolution happened, there was all these groups that they were fighting and the division was big. It was really huge. My aunts, I had two aunts who didn't talk to each other for 4 or 5 years because one was on one side, one was on the other side. So this happened to a lot of families, So I, for me, I think I learned that if you want to make change, you have to be a part of things. So
Definitely.
yeah.
To check in with you just in case. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
being with us.
Yeah.
You were phenomenal at telling your story and making meaning in your life.
Thank you.
That's a skill that you have.
Finally in my 50s, Julia.